Good evening and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of the 24th of October. Apologies for absence. We have apologies from the Deputy Leader, Theresa Murray, and Adam Price will be with us later in the meeting. Are colleagues content that I sign the record of decisions of the 26th of September? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3, any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Nobody is interesting tonight. That's helpful. That then moves us on to the first substantive item tonight, which is the Capital Strategy 24-25. And I'll be leading off, and I know other colleagues will want to comment on this. So I'll move the recommendations as per the report. This is a really key document. As a council, this sits very much alongside both our budget that will be moving on February the 29th and the council plan, which we're already working on. And we'll bring forward in due course next year as well. This is about all aspects of the council. If you think about a capital strategy, you might just think about buildings or maybe just highways, but actually, as the document clearly shows, it is all aspects of this council. And whether it's the physical buildings, the wider infrastructure, or things like Medway 2.0, revolutionising actually how we'll do aspects of our business as a local authority. And we do that in the context as the introduction to the strategy clearly works out. In a backdrop of difficult financial challenges for us as a council, we're not unique in that, but certainly with those upper tier pressures of social care, that puts these finances under real close scrutiny, but also at a time when we're welcoming a number of funding opportunities that Medway's been successful in, whether that's opening up our brownfield sites, whether that is close working with our partners in the NHS, whether that is bringing forward UK Shared Prosperity Funds, and so much more. And of course, in particular, I'm proud of the fact that out of the many, many councils that put themselves forward, Medway was one of just 9 that was selected for the Lottery Heritage Fund, £200 million, of which a sizable sum will be coming to Medway. So we're getting on with business, we're getting on with doing stuff. And from that perspective, this strategy makes it very clear that we are taking a different approach to the previous administration in a number of areas. I know if Theresa was here tonight, for example, she'd certainly wanted to focus on the vision we've got around care for Medway, something which I know she's particularly passionate about. So I'm really proud to move this. This is the first key strategy document which shows there is a different administration here. And I say this will be looked at with that context of the 2 other documents, the budget and importantly the council plan that we'll bring forward next year. I'll pause at that point because I'm sure that other cabinet colleagues will want to make contributions. So happy to throw open to colleagues. Simon, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vincent. Thank you very much to the officers for this report. It's a really important piece of work, something that we have to look at every year. And I think I just wanted to sort of, 2 issues really. One, in firstly, just say how difficult things are, and Vincent's already stressed that, and the report makes that clear. These are very difficult financial times for us, but that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be investing where we can with our capital programme to make Medway a better place for the future. And in that respect, I just wanted to focus on the issue of transport. And this here, and people think immediately of transport of cars and buses, but actually there's more to it than that. Our Safer, Healthier Streets programme is part of this, where we're looking to introduce the school streets and various other initiatives that we're working on at the moment. And some of that is coming from capital funding that we've required. We're looking at bus services and EV charging as well within this report. And I think one of the things that is really important, people don't realise is transport as well, is the replacement of our refuse collection vehicles. Those have reached the end of their time, and there's a significant sum of the capital funding now made available to start that replacement programme. And that's a sort of a wider capital project, looking at how we manage waste in Medway going forward over the next sort of 10, 20 years even. So this is a hugely important part of our work, hugely important programme of work, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Nashaba.
Thank you, Vincent. I think just to echo some of the words that Simon just mentioned there. I think this is a hugely challenging point, particularly in the housing market that we see. And I think every business and organisation is struggling in terms of looking at sort of what the future could potentially look like and the increased costs and the pressures that inflation are placing and having to review forecasts in line with that. However, I also agree that even within that context, we have to remain ambitious, and we have to continue to look forward and see how we can really make Medway the place that we want it to be when it comes to our capital programme. I specifically wanted to just pick up on some of the projects that we have outlined there from MDC, which are actually strategic and vital to regeneration across Medway. And I think it's helpful that we've talked about that, and specifically looking at Mountbatten House as part of that wider context of regeneration in Chatham. The second thing that I did want to highlight is, given some of the pressures, is particularly the current strains that we face as a local authority, like many others, on temporary accommodation. And it's really important that the report highlights some of those challenges, but also talks about the potential to look at this a bit more innovatively, because at the moment, the pressures for next year are, as set out, 2.6 million additional to what was originally forecast, and that is putting significant pressures in budgetary terms. This is also a problem that potentially isn't going to go away overnight. So looking at that longer term plan around how we review our temporary accommodation is vital to this. And very similarly, the final area of this report that I think it's just helpful to make sure that we talk about is the no use empty properties section, because that scheme is fundamental. As it says, we've got 1,500 long-term vacant properties in Medway. We've got to be able to bring those forward potentially for housing use, but also to help us address some of the challenges we've got with homelessness, as well as the challenges that creates in our communities more generally, where we have empty properties that have been sitting as such for quite some time. So I think there's some really important elements of this report that need to be picked up on, given the context that we're in, as well as looking more longer term in terms of how there is some potential for exciting projects that are about Medway's longer term future.
Thank you very much, Nashaba. Tracy.
I thought it was a very comprehensive report, as a lot of complex work has gone into it, covers so many areas. I particularly want to look at the area relating to schools. I was pleased to bring to the full council last week the school place planning strategy, and the delivery of that strategy is supported by our current capital programme. It delivers additional school places and maintains our school buildings. However, the number of school places will continue to grow. At the moment, many of these additional places are accommodated in bulge classes, but this has its limits, and we won't be able to go on accommodating the growing number of children in this way. New schools will need to be built if our housing development progresses in the way that we think it will. Next year and the year after, we'll be getting minimal basic need funding from the government, and currently there are no centrally funded free school waves available. This means that currently any new builds would have to be funded by the local authority, and it's vitally important that we press government to make sure we are properly funded, to make sure that we're able to provide good quality school places to a growing school population, and we're not reliant solely on S106 contributions and on borrowing.
Thank you very much indeed, Tracy. Tristan.
Thank you very much, Vince. And I'm going to talk a bit about highways. People might be aware we have 832 kilometres of carriageways in Medway, 198 structures, including 54 bridges, 104 retaining walls, and we have 26,325 streetlights. These are all important numbers because in this report, there is a picture painted over the last 10 years of a government that has been absolutely underfunding our asset infrastructure. This isn't just across Medway, but also across Kent, where they've reported that their network is in a parlour state. We have roads that are in certainly classified and unclassified roads that are now, I think many of us drive on them, are in a very, very poor state indeed. And earlier on this year, the Highway Asset Management Strategy was published. Councillor Filmer acknowledged actually in that strategy that our annual budget for carriageways is currently in the Tory budget 2.6 million, but the lifestyle modelling now indicates that we need an annual budget of 4.2 million if this is to be sustained. So what the Tories have left is a legacy of potholes. and we're going to see an increasing number of these on our infrastructure as a result of 10 years of Tory decadence in terms of finances and the incompetence with the economy that Liz Truss and others before her have left us. And that legacy, I'm afraid, is one that will be picked up year after year, almost a crisis actually on our roads where potholes become endemic. And there is a necessity now for central government to step in. And I think all councils have acknowledged this through the LGA, similar to in education and other aspects, to fund local government, which makes it even more frustrating that we get denial from the opposition on this, where we are sent it cap in hand to thank the Chancellor, when we've had numerous Chancellors over the last 10 years which have successively failed to fund local government and have left us very many councils close to the precipice. So this is an important strategy document. It does set the future, but it also sets a number of key messages, and one of those loud and clear is that there are a number of areas where government has to step up and it has to provide the finance for local government to deliver the services. One of those is highways, and my fear is that this message is being muddled and denied by people who absolutely should know better, and they should be themselves challenging government to try and release those funds. So a really positive report overall, but there are elements within it, including education funding, where next year, the government is predicted to cut education funding by £1.5 to £2 million, and that is an unacceptable number, and we need to be challenging that. So once again, we need a change of government. I'm hopeful with that we can see that investment in our capital increase, but at the moment, some of the conditions of our services are not where we'd want them to be, and I think this report is open and honest about those challenges. Thank you. Thank
you very much, Tris. If there's no other colleagues, let me just respond to a couple of the comments there. Simon, you're absolutely right. Again, very early on, post May the 4th, we were picking up a capital request for in the region of £20 million, which has to happen. We can't not have waste trucks picking up that waste on a weekly basis. So those are the sorts of direct pressures we've had to pick up. We knew it was going to be a financial challenge before the election. We found some of these particular challenges, the stones we've been unturning, and rest assured we're continuing to unturn stones, and we will be very open and transparent, both where we find stuff we'll need to resolve, but importantly, where I think there's questions for the previous administration. When we find those, we'll be very clear and transparent about that. Nashaba, I want to thank you for your work, particularly around temporary accommodation and the highly recognised specific issue we have literally over the river from where we are tonight. Look, I think this is a national issue, but we've been very, very clear, particularly on the issue of permitted development. We were against it in opposition. We're against it now with the administration. And to be fair to our opposition group, they were clear when they were in control of the council, they opposed it as well. So we need to keep sending that very strong message to central government. Whoever's in central government, permitted development for a size and scale of Anchorage House is not acceptable. The additional housing that comes with no Section 106 payment is not acceptable. And we'll keep having that debate wherever we need to. And Tracy and Tristan, you raised two issues which, again, for us as an upper tier authority, education and highways, you just have to look around the rest of the country. We're not unique in this. I think there have been some very specific pressures we've had around school places. It's been frustrating over the last few years that we've basically, with the one exception, not seen a school build project in time in budget. And that's put direct pressure on other schools that remain. So we need to be clear that, moving forward, whatever that capacity building looks like, that we expect Department for Education, trusts, Regional Schools Commissioner, whoever it may be, to do their part of the deal, because we haven't had that over the last few years. So, colleagues, I'm grateful for your contributions as always. Rest assured, let's be really clear, this Cabinet is working every single day on these issues alongside the challenging conversations we're having around that budget pressure, because the two absolutely go hand in hand. And although capital budgets and revenue budgets are two different things, the relationships are absolutely interlinked, and you can see that on a number of issues here. So on that basis, are colleagues happy to support the recommendations in the report? Thank you very much indeed. Let's then move on to the next item on the agenda, which is around the Q1 Treasury Management report. We're asking the recommendation to note the report. I'd start by saying a big thank you to the Audit Committee. Colleagues can see the questions laid out in paragraph 10. I know there's former members of the Audit Committee on here as well, so I think often on a cross-party basis, that committee does a really important job going into the level of detail which perhaps as a cabinet we wouldn't necessarily go into a meeting like this. So I'm grateful for the work they do. And I think in particular I'd ask colleagues to recognise 10.7.6, because I think in a time when, quite rightly, as I said on Thursday night, the local media, the national media are looking at our financial situations and looking at what else is happening across the local government sector. One of the differentials between this administration and others who have gone further down the track of financial challenges is that there hasn't been the kind of gamble risk levels which are unacceptable actually, and we know that because we can see from Thurrock and Woking, to name two, there are others where those risks were too high, and ultimately council taxpayers there are literally paying the price. It's worth saying as well, and colleagues may have some contributions to make on this, that, and Tris, you made reference to this in your previous contribution. Of course, there are some specific challenges around Treasury management because of interest rates being at such a high level. I put the blame fairly and squarely for those 42 days of chaos which residents are now paying the price for. And I think we're celebrating an anniversary of that today, whether it's her being kicked out, I'm not sure, but either way, thank goodness that wasn't a long-term financial experiment for this country and for our community here in Medway. So the report speaks for itself. We are in a challenging financial time. We will deal with that in the ways we've talked about elsewhere, but happy to take any questions or comments from colleagues on the report tonight, please. Lauren.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I mean, as you've said, you know, we are in a difficult financial position, and scrutiny of all finances, including Treasury management, becomes particularly important, and that includes Cabinet. We have a role to play in that as well. So with that in mind, I have two areas that I'd like to pick up on in the paper, both on page 68. One regards the Lothbury Property Fund, where we're told that the performance is quite poor and that fund is currently suspended as they try to sell the assets in a controlled manner. A couple of questions on this. Do we know what the scale of the redemption requests are to that property fund, particularly compared to the overall size of the fund? Do we have any idea how long the fund suspension is expected to last? And then finally, do we know how they're planning to restructure the portfolio? And then the other area I'd like to cover are the lender option borrower options loans. This is LOBO loans. This is paragraph 8.2 of that same page 68, where we're told that one of the LOBO lenders has increased their interest rates and that we decided to repay £5 million principal at par. So I'm just asking if you could let us know what the proportion of our debt is that is held in LOBOs, because there's quite a lot of interest in them as a product, and the estimated financial impact on us as a council if some of the other LOBO lenders followed suit.
Thank you very much indeed, Lauren. Very helpful and important questions. Like I say, I think it's right to have that level of scrutiny here at the Cabinet meeting. So on the portfolios, and particularly Lothbury, I mean, I think that the latest information on that is that there's a date set for the 31st of December, that there needs to be an alternative solution found by that point, otherwise the fund will be wound up. There isn't an exact figure of how many redemptions were put in. It's a large number of redemptions. Happy to get the exact figure for you. And certainly, you know, it's worth saying that the other two funds that we have, particularly CCLA, you know, recognised across local government, there's no suspensions of those at this stage. So in the sense of our relatively small portfolio of, you know, 3 funds, clearly we'll be keeping a very close eye on that, and I know officers are keeping us updated as we move forward on that. But Loughborough at this stage, there needs to be a solution found, and to say obviously the fund holders are working on that. But the deadline for that is the end of the calendar year. On Lobos, and again, I pay particular tribute to Tristan. This is not a new issue for us in Medway, because again, Tristan quite rightly was looking at this as a product, going, are we sure this is the right thing for us? So it's right that we took the option to basically cash in the £5 million to hand that back to pay off the loan. That's the offer that the very nature of the product allows to happen. There's no indication from the market that other lenders are looking to exercise their option to change the interest rates. I don't think, hindsight's a wonderful thing. I suspect if we'd been the administration at that time, we probably wouldn't have taken these products, but who's to say? It's not for us to change history necessarily. And of course, a lot of the decision making, if somebody else was to step forward, will be based on things like the Public Works Loan Board. What is their current rate at that time? As around the total, what is Lobos as a total percentage of our borrowing? In the sense, if you turn to paragraph 7.1, you can see there. So Lobos is just around £100 million. So if you look at the very first line of that, of the kind of long-term borrowing, which is PWLB, Public Works Loan Board, and Lobos, it's about 50%, just under 50%. Obviously, that will change slightly because of the redemption that we took, the option we took. So it's a sizable sum of our longer-term borrowing. Obviously, there's other borrowing in there, particularly from other local authorities. There's quite a sizable sum. But of the two, probably most recognised in local government, and you're right to say, actually, Lobos had a strong focus in the last few years. And again, Tristan, along with others, were holding that product to account. Certainly, Tristan was here in Medway. So it's a sizable sum. And obviously, as time moves on, we will look at whether anybody else steps forward. But the indication at this stage, we're not expecting anybody else to do what that one provider did in the sense of put up the rates. But that will be a decision that will be taken at the time based on the information available to officers when that comes forward. Thank you for those questions. Again, important questions, because these are not small amounts of money. This is quite substantial funding. Anything else from anybody else on that? No, thank you. Like I say, Audit Committee, if colleagues and the public haven't seen the Audit Committee looking at this, again, there are a number of questions which I know Cabinet members would have asked if they hadn't been asked already by that committee. On that basis, are colleagues happy to note the report as per paragraph 1.1? Thank you. Let's then move on to Chatham Centre Design Code. Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vince, and thank you, everybody, and thank you very much to the officers. This is a really amazing piece of work, and it's down to some really hard work by the planning team and those who've been supporting them in producing this. I think it's always sad to hear the difficult stuff that we've had to deal with, the budgetary constraints we're under and the problems we have, particularly over revenue. But this is one we still have to plan for the future. We still have to think about what do we want Medway to be in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, and in 50 years' time. And that's what this is all about. We've got a fantastic coast and countryside. We've got amazing, huge housing estates around the outskirts in Parkwood and places like that where a lot of our community live. But we've also got our town centres, which are struggling, and the town centres across the country are struggling. What we're trying to do is address that problem by looking at how they're designed for the future and how they're designed to become centres of our community. And that's what this report is all about. And it's part of a wider picture of consultation. I mentioned before the different ways we're consulting on projects in Medway, and in particular around Chatham. We've got the neighbourhood plan for Arches, which is going into its final stages now. A lot of work has gone into that. The Chatham intra area has also got a major consultation about to begin there, both on its conservation area status and the design for that area as well. And in the heart of it is our local plan, and we're out to consultation this month on that. So we're doing a lot of work throughout Medway on consultation, and in particular here in Chatham. This particular piece of work is kind of a pilot study on a national level. It was introduced by the government that we need these town centre design codes in place, and we were fortunate enough to gain some funding thanks to some hard work by teams of officers who brought that funding in. And what we've produced is being described as an exemplar, a really classic piece of work, not just here in South East, but nationally. That's how it's being referred. That's how good this work is. And it talks about, it's kind of like a pilot in many respects, and it fits into a design pattern about creating beautiful places, improving the environment, and setting a standard for new development in Chatham based upon national codes of design. And I think what we're looking at now is a period of 6 weeks, starting in November, when we're going to ask the public what their views are, based upon an initial piece of consultation work, more sort of community engagement work that's already been going on right throughout the summer, including with the architect students from Kent University, and some wacky ideas came out of that, which is good fun. And it deals with things like transport, movement, environment, nature, open spaces, the built form, all those aspects of the design of Chatham Town Centre for the future. That's what this is about. We're consulting on it now, so what I'm looking for is member support to take this through. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Simon. Any colleague wish to comment on this? I mean, Lauren, please go ahead.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I just wanted to support the recommended option to go out to consultation and just the overall approach about having a design code. It obviously provides a really clear framework for our regeneration plans, and obviously we'll get the public buy-in through the consultation process, which is obviously incredibly important. I really welcome the fact that it makes clear that empty sites should be a priority for development. You know, this will obviously have a really positive impact in terms of increasing footfall and support for businesses and a boost to local jobs. And also wanted to welcome the focus on creating incubator spaces for local creative and start-up businesses in Chatham, including things like market stalls and better use of our railway arches. There's lots of potential here that I think we can unlock through this design code and from working with planners. And from a skills perspective, as Simon has said, I really welcome the engagement with the students from the School of Architecture and Planning at the University of Kent. We have a lot of really talented young people, and it's important that they're involved in this exciting work, which really sets out how Chatham is going to look in future. So yeah, just want to support it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Nashaba.
Thank you. Sorry, eventually I will get this mic to work. Thank you. I think I just wanted to echo the words of colleagues with reference to how this is a really strong template for how we should kind of take forward and lead regeneration across the towns. And I think that there is certainly in terms of being able to bring this forward at this point, and gives us a real opportunity to realise some of the vision that we have for Chatham, and how that comes together. I think that's a really important part of this, is really taking all of the different elements of what we want to achieve within Chatham Town Centre, within that regeneration programme, and see how it all fits together. For me, the bigger piece around this is also around the interconnectivity across Medway. So certainly the impact that this could potentially have into Intra, but also into Gillingham as well, and I think it sort of sets that framework around how we can start to build out a wider regeneration programme that is suitable for the towns and can drive an investment, but also show what how some of this is realised and visualised together. So I'm really keen to support it. I think it's a really well-written document. It's been brought together through comprehensive consultation, which is a fundamental underpinning of this, and I'm very happy to put that on the record today and support colleagues in bringing this forward, because I think it will be really transformational for this part of Medway.
Thank you very much, Nashaba. Harinder.
Yeah, not too much different from colleagues just before. I welcome the design code in that it does show us a way forward, and maybe to sort of take some of the heat out of the, how do I say, the tense planning context that often sort of local authorities can find themselves in. One route out of it is sort of building beautifully, building and creating things in an aesthetically pleasing way, and a design code really does help that. So I was yeah, it was good to see that those conversations were happening in consultation leading up to the design code, looking at some of the fine-grained sort of architecture in Chatham that's there that we want to preserve, but also enhance as well and show off in a way that I think Chatham hasn't had the chance to do yet. So I'm fully supportive of this. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just before I come back to Simon for any final comments, certainly I'm fully supportive of this. Of course, I declare an interest as a ward councillor. The vast majority of this will impact on my ward. But actually, if you look at the consultation that's already taken place to where we've got to today, I mean, the paragraphs in Section 8 are huge. And they're trusted names and trusted organisations that have got an interest in making sure Chatham can succeed. And Nashaba is absolutely right to say we start here and it rolls out and it flows out. And that's really important because we value all 5 of our towns. And Lauren is already doing an amazing job having those conversations with town centre forums, getting them up and running where perhaps, we know, for example, in Strood, it hadn't been there for half a decade. That's already getting underway under this Labour administration. We're supporting that community to have their voice, which is what those forums are ultimately about. So a huge thank you to everyone who's got this document to where it is already today. And I know, look, we're doing a lot of consultation. You're right, Simon. But actually, that's what we're about. We're about listening. We're about changing when we hear things. And absolutely, we'll do that, I'm sure, again with this as well. It's a huge document. There's lots in there. But actually, it's a really exciting thing. It's a really exciting document because I know at the heart of it that the people of Chatham are already having their say on what they want their community to look like moving forward. Back to you, Simon.
Thanks very much, Vincent. Thank you all, colleagues, for your comments and support for this issue. I think one of the things I want to stress is about how we're dealing with investment and dealing with development in Medway and looking to the future. And I mentioned the word investment because that's what this will do. This will bring investment into the heart of our towns. And we're not just going to be looking at it for here. Chatham is first, but there's Gillingham, there's Strood, there's Raynham, and there's Rochester. Our town centres all need some help and support, and that's going to be coming through over the next few years. So we're looking at how we make Medway a really outstanding place. And it's based around what we call sustainable development. It's about the economy, and things like the nighttime economy, leisure and recreation, but also business and companies moving in here. It's also about the environment, making it a clean and green and safe place for people to live and work and stuff like that. And finally, it's about where people live. I mean, Chatham's got thousands of residents, and we need to be making sure that they've got a safe, clean and a good place to live. So that's what this report is all about. It will form part of the basis of the local plan as well going forward. And on the consultation issue, we have now had over 5,000 hits on Medway's website on the local plan. So that's how much people really care. I mean, that is a real sign of the fact we may feel we're over consulting, but actually we're not, because people are responding and they're welcoming this consultations. So I thank members' support for this.
Thank you very much, Simon. Is that agreed, colleagues? Thank you very much. Let's move on then to page 265, item 7. Harinder, over to you.
Thank you, Vince. I'm hoping Cabinet will agree to this report tonight. Medway, as a place, desperately needs to be in a better place with larger events and festivals. And key to doing that is having a robust policy in place, which thankfully we now have, given the full council just gone. And once again, I'd like to place on record my thanks to the events team for their work on that policy. And if accepted, the Great Lines Music Festival will be the first such large-scale festival to be delivered, or at least approved, using our new policy. As such, when bringing this forward, I want members, but also the public, to feel confident that there will be a set of comprehensive plans and clear agreements in place. Indeed, these are part of the terms and conditions, so they have to be. Many of these are outlined in the report, and you would expect a well-managed festival to have these plans in place. But what I would like to stress to colleagues there is that the operator's commitment to consultation and feedback in the lead up to the first festival and then the subsequent review. That includes ward councillors, residents, and stakeholders such as friends of groups that will all need to input to make this a success. I'm aware of some heritage, some ecological concerns, and I'm assured that these will be addressed in partnership with the council and the operator, especially in light of the new senior team in place since the acquisition of Dream Valley. And of course, it would be remiss of me, finally, to not mention that the council is not exposed to financial risk, and indeed this will generate much needed income. So hoping that this gets approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harinder. I've got Nashaba, then Lauren. Nashaba.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Harinder. So I think it was when this a proposal around a festival at the Great Lines was initially proposed, which was due to happen earlier this year in May, there was a lot of concern around the potential impacts and what that would mean for the local area. So obviously the site itself it is a big one, but there is also a lot of residential development around it. There would have been a significant potential impact on residents, on parking. We also have the hospital site there as well. So there were some concerns around what this would mean to host a festival of this scale. I'm really pleased that the organisers and that us as a local authority have gone away and looked at this in a bit more detail. The reassurance of having the outdoor events policy in place is giving the checks and balances that we need to be able to bring forward something of this nature on the Great Lines and in Gillingham and in Medway. And I think that's a really important part of document that underpins a lot of the work that we're doing here. So on that basis, I think this is a much improved proposal to the one that we've seen previously. I'm also reassured around the fact that the consultation that's going to support this will be robust, and I'm pleased to see that those dates have already gone into diaries. So I certainly have my invite to come along and consult and speak on this and hear the views. I think it's going to be really important that we work with the residents, but also businesses, so that this is a festival that has an impact that is, of course, I recognise the income generation element of it, but also there's a wider context around how we want to position Medway in terms of the work that we want to do and how we want to be seen as an inviting area, which is kind of hosting interesting events and encouraging people to come here and visit us. So I think it's a part of that programme and project, but also looking at how we can really generate that footfall that supports the local economy as well. So on those grounds, I think this is a really helpful. I'm pleased to see the paper with the level of detail that's come through, that the work that has been done behind the scenes, both with the operators but also as a local authority in terms of having those checks and balances. And as a ward councillor for the area, again, these were some of the concerns around parking, the pressures will of course not disappear, but I'm pleased to see that there are plans in place to certainly come up with a process that allows us to manage that, including waste and litter management, as well as the impact on the wider area. There's always going to be challenges when you do something of this size and scale. I think that's just, we have to recognise that, but it's about how you mitigate that and also how you make sure that the local community is part of that decision making. And I'm seeing that with this. So I would be pleased to support it.
Thank you very much, Nashaba. Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to be supporting it as well. I think it's a really exciting event, and is, as others have said, is much better managed, I think, than the previous proposal, which gives me a lot of assurance. Obviously, there's going to be a really positive impact in terms of local hotels, restaurants, transport operators, and what have you, which is really to be welcomed. But I did want to just highlight a couple of aspects of the organisers' approach that I think is particularly welcome and beneficial to local people and our local business community. So, for instance, using a local recruitment agency to employ local people, creating work experience opportunities for local students, and getting Medway and Kent-based suppliers on board where possible are really positive approaches that I really welcome. And it's obviously very important that we, as well as the organisers, get the message out there in Medway, so as many local people and businesses as possible can take advantage of this really great opportunity. And I'm just conscious that we are tonight being asked to agree a programme for 3 years, and I'd just like to make sure that we consider a kind of review mechanism within that time period, just to make sure that we're happy with the way that things are progressing, but also from my point of view that they're delivering on those aspirations that they've set out for us now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Simon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vince, and thank you to Harinder and the team for producing this report. I think it's important that we stress how important our green spaces are across the whole of Medway. They're a precious asset to us all. They're really important to the communities where they lie. But equally, as well as being important from the sort of wildlife and landscape and recreation point of view, they're also important spaces for people to come together and have fun. And the Great Lines in particular has that capacity And what we're trying to do here, and what is happening here, and I think we'll be successful, is that careful management between protecting the green space, looking after it, but also allowing it to become a place for the community to get together and really enjoy themselves. And I think that's the balance that this report shows, and also the new outdoor policy shows that as well. Very carefully, very clearly, they've worked hard to make sure that everybody is engaged, and at the end of the day we do protect our green spaces as well as utilising them. And a good example would be, for instance, on the Great Lines with this event, avoiding the key wildlife sites, which is happening. I've seen the map already, so they've done that. The skylark nests and the red star thistle are safe from any kind of disturbance from that point of view. So we've got a really good balance of the use of our green spaces, both for big recreation when we can fit it in, but also making sure that we preserve our precious spaces for our communities. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Simon. Before I come back to you, Harinder, let me say a couple of bits. I think, from my perspective, again, like Nashaba, obviously I've got a bit of this in my ward, but most of it is certainly in Gillingham South. I welcome the fact that before we're discussing this tonight, there are dates in the diary for those meetings. That didn't happen with the previous provider. And I think it's a really important message from this meeting tonight that this is a different organisation than the one that brought forward the initial proposals. When this council is being asked about refunds for Catherine Jenkins, that's a problem. So let's be very, very clear. This is an external operator, but different to the one who made the initial proposal. And it's right, you're right in your opening remarks, Harinder, to say we need to facilitate this. The history shows us in recent years when this council, under its previous administration, ran concerts, we ran up a bill of several £100,000. We can't afford to do that. But that shouldn't mean we don't bring forward some exciting, innovative, collaborative opportunities of this nature. But we need to have those safeguards in place, those checks and balances, and colleagues have quite rightly highlighted this. And it is right that we had in place the policy first. And look, regardless of nonsense tweets we saw Thursday night, and other people could have put out nonsense tweets about politicians voting against Martin's Law, but we're not going to do that. We take a moral high ground on these things because that's the right thing to do. But it is right to have that policy in place first. And I know, Simon, in particular, you were vociferous in conversations to make sure those protections are there because, again, we saw previously, under the previous administration, events happening on green spaces, damage happening, and no recompense, no replacement, no refurbishment. That's now not going to happen because the policy is really clear on that. So I'll be supporting this tonight. I look forward to meeting. I'd encourage residents, whether they live nearby or further afield, paragraph 8.5 has got a really clear timetable and we'll be holding them to that timetable. Let's be really clear. We want this to succeed. And Lauren is right in particular to say we need to go back and check in year 2 and year 3. And I think the policy refers to that elsewhere, that there will be those reviews built in, and that's right and appropriate. So I'd be happy to support this tonight because of those changes from the original provider, because of that policy being in place, and importantly, because actually this organisation is ready to talk to us as elected members, to those key stakeholders as laid out in 8.6, and importantly, the public at large as they've laid out in the report tonight. Harinder, back to you.
Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, colleagues. Like I said, when I became cabinet member, it's interesting, sort of the number of things I began noticing because you take on certain responsibilities. And one of the things I noticed was all of a sudden I sort of started getting a bit angry how other councils and other operators were advertising for festivals and events here. And we were not able to do the same or not doing the same. At least it seemed that way to me. So it goes back to Councillor Khan's point that we need to have that sort of ambition to be able to put on events of this nature and of this size, so that we can not only provide recreation for sort of residents here, but also attract that inward investment that Councillor Edwards was talking about. And as raised by Councillor Curry, did a much better job at talking about anything to do with the environment or the ecology than I ever could. So thank you for covering those points. And absolutely, I think this is, we're not saying that this is carte blanche. We absolutely have built in a set of policies and a set of questions and set of reviews annually as well, going back to that point, that we will sort of revisit, and then we'll make sure that this works to our benefit, that this policy, but also the contract that we'll have with the operator works to our benefit. And the last point that I would make, which Vince, you spoke on, about actually this is a different organisation behind that will be delivering this. It's important to note that their experience is considerable. So this is not a new kid on the block. This is very much an experienced organisation that has experience of delivering large-scale festivals up and down the country, and so we expect them to have and build on a good relationship with us so that we can deliver festivals of this nature, and also take it as a learning process for future events. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Harinder. Is that agreed, colleagues? Thank you. That moves us on to item 8, which I will be moving in Teresa's absence. This is Gateway 1 procurement, so the start of the procurement process for the Medway Domestic Abuse Service. I want to highlight in particular paragraph 3.1, how this is funded, and I think it's important to recognise it. I often talk about One Medway. This is a really practical, kind of operational example of One Medway. So the majority of funding comes from public health, but there's also important levels of funding from the Integrated Care Board, from Children's Social Care, and from housing. And I think it's that recognition that actually that sums up why this is important, because domestic abuse is something which the whole system needs to play their part in, both trying to obviously tackle through education, but importantly dealing with those regrettably who are in those circumstances at this time. So it will go through the procurement process if agreed tonight, as laid out in the report. Any colleague wish to speak on this? I've got Nashaba, then Zoe.
Thanks, Vince. I just wanted to say that I fully support the recommendations set out in the report, and that I think the open market procurement will be the best option in terms of how we bring this forward, taking into consideration the other options that have been placed within the report. And certainly the option to not do anything is certainly one that I don't think we can in any way entertain. This is a really important issue, and one that we need to have the structures in place to get right. I'd also just like to echo your comments around this not just being about one area of support. This is about the services that we have as an authority and wider coming together, because there are so many elements of this, and it has to be something that is delivered in a joined up way. And so therefore anything that takes this forward has to recognise that there is no one part of this that you can sort of take out and look in isolation, because it is all about that kind of cohesive approach in order to provide the best possible service. So I would fully support what the report has suggested. I think the option 4 is the right way to take this approach, given some of the conversations that we have had and what's detailed within the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Nashaba. Zoe.
Yeah, really pleased to support this proposal. It's a long time coming, and it's really good to see that this is going to be a multi-agency approach, giving better access to victims of violence across the board. 2 years ago, the Labour group undertook extensive conversations with women and girls across the Medway towns. We spoke to hundreds of people, and it's about time that we were actually starting to address this issue properly. So pleased to support.
No, thank you very much indeed, Zoe. And again, I think, Nashaba, your points are very well made around actually the type of procurement process we go through. And I think we are in a new phase of this, so having that open market opportunity, including potentially new providers who are coming into the market, and there may be a level of partnership working as well. And as a white ribbon ambassador, this is personal. This is important that we're doing this as a council. We are accredited And it's about this sort of action, the practical action of making that accreditation a reality. Our colleagues, therefore, happy to support option 4 as laid out in paragraph 9, I think it is. Great, thank you very much. That closes tonight's meeting at 49 minutes past 7. Thank you very much.